Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. This is Throwback Thursday. One Thursday each month, we take a trip back in time to a previous podcast. With so many new visitors to the podcast, I thought it was a good time to get back to some of the good stuff we've had from the past.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
and stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
So join me now as we travel back in time. This podcast was recorded September 20th, 2019. This is podcast 33 called Labeling OCD. Today in this podcast, what I wanted to do was bring up a subject. Some of it's a little bit what I might call maybe controversial. What I'm hoping to do here is not bring up so much of a viewpoint as an idea to cause thought and discussion for yourself. So I'm going to talk about 2 different labeling ideas here. The first one is labeling OCD itself. I've been since I've been doing this work and since I've been doing the podcast, I'm starting to see more and more different names of OCD come out, different labels of OCD. There's harm OCD, pure O, sexual orientation or homosexual OCD, sudden onset of OCD, relationship OCD, and the list goes on. It's growing. I mean, when we first got involved with OCD and the beast came into our lives, we didn't really know of much. We didn't hear of much others. Now it seems to be growing, and this is where I guess I'd say maybe the controversial part, or I'm just going to pose some ideas here with this. I wonder sometimes about whether we really need to label OCD itself by giving it different, the harm, the relationship OCD, by putting all those in front of OCD. And here's why. I think there's some one side of it that has a positive to it by really narrowing it down. But the other side of it that I wonder about, and again, I'm just putting this out for thought, but is the fact that, we learn this even in a personal sense, but also with the clients I've worked with, is that OCD changes the content constantly sometimes, depending on, it could be, and I really have found that they may call it one thing, like they say they have harm OCD, but that's not the only trigger. That's not the only thing that they obsess over. So, and what I really have learned is in dealing with OCD is that, and this was something I learned from a conference, and I hate to say, I'd love to give credit to the person that gave me this thought, but it's really about dealing with the process versus the content. Because what I would see is, I have OCD and these are the things that trigger it. It's kind of like the thought of he's calling somebody, he's my OCD child, or he's my child that has OCD. It kind of falls in that thought pattern. because of the fact that OCD changes so much. Somebody can go from harm to a relationship, or the relationship can be part of it. I know. Just recently, I interviewed Dr. Jan Weaver. She's on the podcast. One of the podcasts, if you want to look it up, you can. Where she's talking. The whole basis of it was the sexual orientation OCD, and she brought up relationship. She talks about the two of them fall together real well. It's kind of like OCD tends to be a subset of other anxiety disorders. So I always wonder, do we really need to put that kind of name to it? You know, it's relationship OCD, it's harm OCD, whatever it might be, or do we just call it OCD and that it has the traits of worrying about harm or obsessing over harm and this and that, you know? So it's just a thought as to, putting that word on there because, like I say, it'll change. What we found in our personal lives is that um, OCD, when we got one thing settled out, when we maybe helped to manage one trigger from OCD or one obsession with OCD, OCD tried to come up with a new one. And so I would think you could possibly go from a harm OCD to a relationship or to whatever. So I always wondered about that. And like I said, it's not I don't think it's a good or a bad. It's just bringing up thought for yourself. Is it necessary? And the other, what I might add in there is a third category of labeling that it just popped back in my mind. I was thinking of it earlier. Is it important for us to label the child or the person, I should say, with OCD? So that's kind of a question I put out there. I would love to get comments on this. Do you tell the person that they have OCD, or do you just work with them? We went through, in a personal sense, we went through whether we told my daughter or not. Would it be helpful to tell her or not helpful? Because I guess the two sides of it are, on the helpful part, it would let her know that she's not crazy. That this is because it's actually, I was just reading something recently that it has a lot of medical to it, a lot of things going on that aren't functioning in the brain properly, that that you might call medical. So there is a real thing. So it kind of gives the person the idea that hey, this isn't just I'm going crazy or anything, that there's label to it. The other thought of it, the other side of that, kind of we went back and forth on, was, in doing that, does that give her an out? Or does that give her an excuse? Or that give her a chance to put it all on OCD? And, I can't help it, it's OCD. We decided that it was best to tell her, and with a lot of the clients I've worked with, we found it's good to name it. Call it the beast of OCD, so you can really get a sense of it and imagine it as being this beast or whatever you want to make it. You name it, you make it into a creature or something. So I fall on the side of telling the person, naming it, but that doesn't always fit probably. So anyway, again, I throw these things out as just thought process for you. What might be best for your child or the person you're dealing with that has OCD? What would be fit for them? Many times these OCD tends to be a subset of autism or be a subset of something else, where the real emphasis needs to be put on the autism or the real emphasis needs to be put on the ADHD or whatever it is, or just put on the anxiety, that labeling it or telling the person that it's OCD might not be important. But there's some thought. So again, first part is, the first labeling is talking about harm OCD. Do we really need to put that in front of that? Because OCD changes content. We really need to work on the process. The process is the response. How do we respond to it? And that leads me into the third one, which is labeling the thoughts. and just recently had read some information about um, the you do want to label the thoughts, but the difference being is it's labeling versus judging. So labeling the thought is just defining the thought as what is kind of thing. The judging side of that, labeling it as a judgment, like, oh, uh, I'm dirty because my hands are dirty. That's judging the thought and making it part of yourself. Versus in labeling it or defining it is really important to be able to say, oh, that's an OCD thought. I always like the saying I heard not too long ago. Um, it's not me, it's OCD. And that plays out really strong, where you start to recognize and label that that thought is an OCD thought. And then from that, you're able to learn to respond differently to it. Where you accept that's accepting the thought basically by labeling it. Not judging it, not saying I'm a bad person because of it, or that I am dirty because of it, or that I am homosexual, or whatever it is. It's saying, oh, that is an OCD thought. And OCD doesn't put out good thoughts. It's a different way to respond to it. And by accepting, responding to it, defining it, which is what labeling, and then accepting that thought, not agreeing with it necessarily, but accepting it. I like, when to tell clients that when a thought comes up, if you can address it and say, "Oh, there's that OCD thought. So what? I don't want to deal with it." Or um, you can come back at the bully. So, you're saying this. So what are you going to do about it? You know, um, and then it'll if it may come back at you, I don't know. But so it's the idea of defining it, accepting it, seeing it as an OCD thought, and from there you can learn to respond in a way that's not. You don't want to fight it. You don't want to argue with it. You want to accept it as a thought that needs no action. The more you can do that, the more you can label it. And that's what the process is that I talk about. Because it's really not about the content, because that content changes and warps and not true and all that kind of stuff. But the process of being able to respond versus react. Reaction would be, oh, no, I'm not, the response would be, oh, that's just another one of those stupid OCD thoughts. So it's another one of those thoughts. And I'm learning to deal with them. And I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to put it off. I'm not going to put it on me, I should say. So, um, some different some different thoughts around that. You know, um, and one of the things I want to throw out there, and I haven't got an answer for this, but something I went through, and I still believe I'm a more spiritual being than anything else. And in my thoughts, or in my beliefs, I should say, I have this belief that we create from our thoughts, we create from our mind, we create our lives. So when I was thinking about all this labeling and thinking about the what we have to do, how we have to respond to these thoughts, I wondered how that played with that spiritual thought of that we are creative beings, I should say, that we create what we think and how we think. But I guess that would be in the realm. Now, again, I would love any comments on this, but I would guess that would be in the realm of defining it. If it comes in and you define it as OCD, that's when you're not going to create off of. You don't even want to deal with it. And that's the problem I think OCD people are doing. Those thoughts are coming in. We're creating the problem by believing the thought. So maybe I just answered myself in the fact of defining it. That is a good spiritual thought that really helps me, and I want to keep that one. So again, just some thought on what um, can be done, in with labeling, and how are you going to use labeling? Are you going to define yourself as a certain type of OCD, or just the fact that you have OCD? Uh, and how are you going to label those thoughts? Are you going to define them? Are you going to judge yourself based on them and create from those OCD thoughts? And I'm going to, pose to you to start defining and accepting and responding in a way that doesn't fight or argue with OCD. So I will let it go at that. Again, I would love comments, and I, I I really have not gotten a lot, and that helps me direct how I do my next one. So I know, I think I mentioned it in the end on this, but I want to remind you on this. I would love your comments on this because I brought up an issue that goes two different ways, and some people go one way with it, and some people go another way with it. I would love your comments if you go to the invisiblewheelchair.com website. Not, it's just invisiblewheelchair.com, not the, but invisiblewheelchair.com. I would love your comments on this, to get the other side of it or get the thoughts behind it. Did it raise up your the hairs on the back of your neck? It was so off base for you. I would love to know that because, like I said, I brought this up just as a process of getting thought process going for people to think about what does that mean? Does that help me, hurt me? Does it work for me? Does it serve me or not serve me? So again, I will leave it at that. I hope this podcast has been helpful to you, and take care. It's fun to travel back in time and listen to past events and podcasts. Maybe you have a story from the past about how you overcame OCD, or maybe you want to tell what you're going through right now dealing with OCD. We want to hear about it. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com, and on the left-hand side you'll see a little area that says Stories from the OCD Side. Click there and tell us all about it. We'll be happy to listen and put you out there. And remember, my wife and I are here to help you with your OCD and your anxiety. Simply go to familyocd.com or focushealthyfamily.com, and there you can connect with us and get a free consult to find out if we can help you. And thank you for visiting us today on the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, and we'll look forward to your next visit with us. So thanks for coming. Take care.